Welcome to Simply Caroline, a podcast dedicated to women empowerment where we will discuss a bunch of different subjects such as life, parenting, love, business, money, relationships, healing, recovery, addiction, entrepreneurship, and so much more. A podcast I'll do my best to keep simple, fun, and relatable and bring you tools to help you better your life. So thank you for being here. And here's your host, myself, Caroline Blanchard. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This week, I have a fun guest and super interesting and amazing, a very intelligent woman, Erica Wiederlight. Hi, Erica.
Hi, what a great intro. I'm like, thank you. I love being called intelligent.
Yeah. Have you ever, I just got that flash now, have you ever been said that you have a voice similar to Amy Schumer?
No, that's so funny though. That is so interesting.
You do, and you seem to be just as funny as her. So
thank you.
That'd be putting aside because when you talk with Erica, you just smile and laugh. It's fun, but we're talking about a serious subject today. Well, I don't know if it's a serious subject or a subject that was considered so long as a taboo. Anyway, in my world, it was, or, something that people are still very uncomfortable talking about. But I wanted Erica to come and speak about that because it is a huge part of our life. Sexual empowerment. And you know what? You will see as she explains what it is, how deep it can go. So Erica, what is a coach in sexual empowerment?
It's such a good question because, people really, when you tell them that, they're like, what does that mean? What is people, their eyes kind of open and they either are very curious or they're like, that's nice and walk away. So it can be like a party gift, like you want to tell people, or at a party, people will be like, bye, I want nothing to do with this woman. So you have to feel out your audience, but it could be so many different things. And it ranges from so many different things. It could be the stereotypical working with clients, maybe with porn addictions, but it also could range to trauma, whether it be abuse, general trauma. It also could just be, not feeling confident in your body. It ranges from many different things, or, to the more simple, which people don't think about, having a relationship to pleasure in your life. And that means using pleasure, using joy, using radiance as a foundational, pillar in our lives. So it ranges from, it could be the very stereotypical things. It could be moving through trauma and holding space for yourself. It could be, I don't like my body. How do I fall in love with myself? It could be all these different flavors. But the point is, and I deeply feel everyone needs this work because we're affected by this, and, whether it be confidence, whether it be in our truth, whether it be having a relationship to having fun more often. So it's funny because we go to the immediate, which sure it can be, but it also for me is teaching people to cultivate and to create a lifestyle that feels really nourishing to them.
Yes. And it's funny because I'm listening to you and poor mom. I'm sorry, I'm not bashing my mom in any way, but we were raised so strict on that. And it was sexuality was something we were not talking about, and it was almost like swear words. And totally. I get why she was raised by, her parents who were the older generation. But I get how that can put a really big block in someone, because especially I'm listening to you as you say, how to just live a life with a pleasure aspect to it. And it's really ingrained in us, I feel. Maybe not your generation, you're younger, but my generation, the Generation X, I feel it's really ingrained in us that there's still a taboo side to it.
Right. And it's funny too, to touch on that. It's taboo side. And also I love what you said, because the culture also perpetuates a story of living a life, blood, sweat, and tears. You know what I mean? That is really glamorized and that's really celebrated. Make your life really hard, make it there's a big attachment to, it's finally a badge of honor because I sweated it out. And this work is counteracting that, which is scary because people are I don't want to counteract that. What if I'm looked at as lazy or not productive? So it's funny because I always say, pleasure work, people think, oh, it's like pink boas and feathers. And I'm like, listen, it can be that. Like, it can be you eating grapes on a chaise lounge, but it's also deep shadow work. You're confronting years of stories and conditioning around, sure, sexuality, but also just like worth and, how you're supposed to live, quote unquote. So it's very, very interesting work. It's fascinating, the stuff that comes up.
So basically, it's not just going to help your sexuality. It helps you in general.
Yes.
The other part that I want to touch, because that was a part of my childhood as well, is when you have trauma. So I have someone very close to me that had the same trauma, and we both lived it very differently. So in my relationships, it didn't stop me, but it really affected my self-confidence, or I should say the way I would look at sexuality and love. Like for me, it was because it was an abuse when I was 5, it was associating that sex goes with love. So if you want to show someone you love them, that has to be done. So it was really something that took me years to separate and to really, realize it's two different things. And then the other person that is close to me, her was like, she never had really a good sexual life or whatever because the trauma was blocking her. So I guess that people live their trauma differently. But let's talk about that a little bit. Like, how do you help someone evolve through their trauma?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I thank you for highlighting that it shows up so differently in so many people. With all of my clients or, anyone that has experienced trauma, it shows up in such different flavors. Like, some may be a block, some may, have like hypersexuality. Like it's interesting how it formulates. And I think the big thing is, the word that keeps coming to me is safety, because I can't copy and paste this formula on everyone. That would feel very aggressive to the nervous system. That wouldn't feel safe. So for me, I have to be an excellent space holder to meet people where they're at. You know what I mean? Like, I have to be patient and hold space. Like, sure, I want you to go from A to Z, but that may feel too violating. And the whole point is I want to create safety within my clients. So I have to be really vigilant about holding really safe space and holding the person where they're at while gently, gently, gently moving us forward. And that includes safety in their own body, because the deal. Sometimes trauma can rip us out of our body. It doesn't feel safe to be in our body. So how can we softly and gently come back into our own bodies, hold space for ourselves? It's a long, not a long process, but it's a loving process, I should say. And it's really a beautiful, it sounds corny, but it's like a beautiful privilege to be able to do that work, because, and I always celebrate my clients that, wow, you were willing to do this work. Cause you don't have to, it's scary. It's part of my mouth, but it's scary. It's scary to do and confronting, but when you're held, it's magical. And so I'm really grateful. I'm really honored to be able to hold these amazing humans through that work.
Yeah. And I raise my hat to anyone who will actually go and seek help.
Yes.
Because I think that when these things happen, you go to the basic of what you're being offered. Like, there's well, depending on which country you're in, but anyway, in my country, there's like services that will help you, but it's so professional and at a high level. It's just really to not even understand, but accept what happened and then moving on. But it doesn't go within yourself. It doesn't dig in. So for someone to say, I want to coach, it's very vulnerable, because first of all, who likes to talk about their sexuality? Like, well,
right.
I'm saying that, and I have friends that are just constantly talking about that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, shush it. But for me, it's not comfortable. I will talk about it jokingly, but never about mine or something that is very private. So for someone to seek help, and I've never sought help in that area, but I did in other things like therapy and things like that. And then you have to find your therapist. And because, not everyone will fall onto someone like you and be like, oh my gosh, I lucked out and she's the best. how do you find the right one?
Yeah, that is such a good question. And I also want to add, I love what you just said because you hit such a genius spot is like people don't see, like, let me say this. People don't find the value in why would I hire someone for sexuality? That's first of all, it's time, it's energy. I'm confronting my demons, and also I have to pay for it. On top of that, it's like, yeah, right. Like next, like I'd rather hire a mindset coach or a money coach, which are all fabulous. But it's funny because that's why I intentionally add sexual empowerment, because for me, it was beyond that. Actually, when I tapped into this version of myself, I was the most empowered. And so it is about the sexuality piece, but it's also about the empowerment piece. So I love that you geniusly touched upon that, because people, if you just say, oh, I'm a sex coach, people are like, well, bye, I want nothing to do with you. And so for me, when I was really tapping in, healing wounds, doing this work myself, I made sure I used this, not as something just to heal, I'm better, but I actually used something that was I was deficient, I felt deficient in as a superpower. And so the people that come to me feel like, oh my gosh, this is something that's so triggering to me. And over time, we turn it into their superpower. We turn it into their confidence or their way, instead of something they're fearful of, a way that they could step into their power. So I had to say that because that was so helpful. And with the finding someone, it's so funny. I went to a party 2 weeks ago and everyone's like, what do you do? And these people actually wanted to hear it. And I was like, okay, so let me be patient with me. And they said, like, oh my gosh, it's so funny. We are all really struggling to find good therapists, coaches, because at least in the United States, it's kind of a process, whether if they take your insurance, are they a match? You have to go on a wait list. And one of the girls I was talking to was like, I'm okay now. Like you could do that. She's like, but if I was like deeply depressed, I would not have the energy to do all of these things. Mm-hmm. And you know what I mean? It's like, she's like, now I'm like, okay, it's still a pain, honestly. But if I was really in a dark place, I would not have the capacity. And so I say that because it's just such a shame that this work, and that's why I'm obsessed with getting this work out to so many people. That's why I do podcasts and I have so much free content, because I want this work to be available to everyone. Because when you're in a place that's like not the best, you're like, I don't care. Like, I don't care to reach for the tools right now. So it can be a process. So I just wanted to, shout out to that's a real thing, right?
No, and especially, you're saying that, but like I'm saying, when you come from trauma, but I guess it's in any kind of situation when you have to go talk about your deep personal and, personal. I can't find the other word that I'm looking for right now because it's early morning. And, your personal and intimate information. It's hard. You don't want to share that. So imagine like some people are doing that in a therapy because they're depressed and you need to talk about your feelings. That's very intimate as well. But then when it comes to sexuality, you're like, oh my gosh, am I really going to talk about that or say something and blah, blah. So I admire, what you're doing because it does help a lot of people. And I know that for me, when everything happened when I was young, I didn't get help then. I consulted when I was 40. Yeah. So it was my adult mind talking. And even that was super uncomfortable to use the real words and to describe and this and that. So I can't imagine like when it just happened, how you are. And like you said, when you're in that bad spot, like you don't have any energy to look for it, or you feel vulnerable, you feel down. So I can hear some listeners right now saying or feeling like I'm in that vulnerable place now and I need something, and sometimes we're not even sure what we need, because also I feel when you're in that place of not feeling empowered and not feeling happy or whatever, you don't automatically realize that that's what you need, What would you say to these people right now that, they feel like something is wrong with me? Not wrong with me, sorry, that's really wrong to say because there's nothing wrong with you. But, I feel something wrong in me. Yes. Should I not? Like, what's the process?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's interesting too, because I wanted to piggyback off of what you were saying, which, with the trauma, but also what happens is so often I see people not wanting to invest, sure, financially, but also mentally, all of the stuff because they're like, my life's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's people that have experienced trauma, but it's also people that's quote unquote, my life's okay. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like what's like, and they're like, it's good enough. It's good enough. And I'm like, oh, and we start to obviously go underneath the layers, and there are things that they're uncomfortable with, or they want, they want more attention on. But it's funny because that's also something that I have to hold people. There's a big resistance of, oh, but I haven't experienced a big trauma. My life's fine. I don't really need this. And I'm like, okay, do you want your life to just be fine? Like I support you, but like, don't you like, this is it. You know what I mean? Like there's no dress rehearsal. We're living it. This is it. Do you want this to be it? And so I see that come up a lot. And it is a process. It's like I said, it's a lot of different places you're making yourself vulnerable. Financially, obviously you want someone that you can helpfully invest in, but like financially, emotionally, spiritually, I understand it's a big commitment. And that's why I said this before, but and I just had someone enroll yesterday and they're like, okay, what's my first homework? I'm like, hold on. I'm like, the first homework is you celebrating yourself. Like this is a big deal that you are going to commit to doing this work. So, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm like, I want you to report back how you're going to celebrate. Are you going to take yourself out to ice cream? Are you going to take yourself to the movies? Are you going to draw yourself a bath? I'm like, I just want you to celebrate that you did something very courageous and brave. But yeah, I think it's so interesting because like I always say, everyone needs this work, but we always do oh, it's fine. Or I see people a lot like, I'm going to do A, B, and C first. And this is kind of on the back burner. And I'm like, I totally get that. And you have to honor where you're at. And this work bleeds into everything. If you don't feel confident, you're not going to ask for a raise. If you don't feel confident, you're going to, self-sabotage relationships and push people away. Like as we think, it's so funny because we think this work for some reason, because there's so much shame around it, we've compartmentalized it. So it's like, oh, that's like in that box over there. Mm-hmm. So I will deal with that box over there when I have time to deal with box over there. You're never going to have time to deal with that box over there. Life is crazy. So what I have to remember to remind people is it's not a box over there. That box is the root and affects everything. It affects your money. It affects your relationships. It affects how you live your life. So it's a primal, in a way, it's a primal need. But because there's so much shame and conditioning that it's bad and wrong, we almost rip it outside of ourselves and put it in a box away that we don't want to look at, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? I'm glad you touched on the shame part because it just brought me back to when I was in corporate. I've been in corporate for 20 years, and most of that time, 15 out of those 20, I was in male dominant worlds, whatever. And I remember working with, turtlenecks and pants, never wore a skirt, never work a décolleté or whatever, cleavage, something showing cleavage. And then I had competitor women in other companies dressing like that. And I was just like, I don't get why they use their sexuality to, boost their business, if I may say. Because me, it was really like, I was being so careful not to shine that in any kind of way because I wanted people to talk with my brain and not my breast. And I was just like, really focusing on shutting down any part of my sexuality or femininity, I should say.
Yeah.
And now that I look back at that, because now I'm like not the same age and, I've done tons of self-development and everything. And, but I'm sure some women think about that like that still. So when we see one that is super comfortable in her body and everything, we're like, why is she?
Yes.
And us, we think that we're going to be taken more seriously if we man up. But it's not even about that. It's really just about the confidence of being in your own skin. And now that I think about that, I'm like, no, that had nothing to do with, what was going on outside. It had to do how I was receiving it and probably pushing it out.
Yes.
But it was a sad time, when I think about it, because I liked skirts and stuff like that. And, to this to this day, when I wear a dress or whatever, I feel like, oh, it's weird because I'm not used to that, but I love it.
Right.
But that was just a sidebar. It's like, yes, there's a lot of shame about all that. What I want to say is that I find it pretty courageous of you and, very unique that you choose to put that title beside your name, because you could also just be an empowerment coach,
Right.
not scare people,
Right.
still go into, those same deep roots that are actually affecting you. So like we were saying in pre-interview, and I'm going a bit everywhere right now. That's my
Please.
squirrel in my mind running around. But, I was just like, Erica, there's not a lot of little girls that are like, what are you going to do when you're older? Oh, I'm going to be a sexual empowerment coach. Where did that come from? Like, what, you got up one day and you were just like, that's it, I'm going and I'm putting that name beside my title. Because by the way, like, I admire you. It takes guts for me and strength to decide, like, that's how I'm showing up.
Thank you. Well, it's funny because if you told me that in high school or middle school, I'd be like, no. Like, I would be like, absolutely not. Like, that is extremely triggering. And it's funny because recently, the deal when you have your own business, you're like, I love this. And sometimes like, I want to burn it down. And now it's like, you committed, you are all over the internet as a sexual empowerment coach, my friend. Like, you committed, which is, like, you committed to this thing. And it's funny because, again, I also having those moments of like, I am so glad I did this, I'm claiming this, and then going to see, I say this, I went to a reunion recently with, a lot of high school people, and they're like, we see what you're doing. I'm like, oh, no. Again, and it's funny because we talked about this before, but I have my own podcast, and when I do solo episodes, it's like I'm talking to myself, and they're like, oh, we heard in episode 3 when this happened. I'm like, oh no, I forgot. Like, I forgot people listen to this.
Side note here, I have people that I talk to in my everyday life, and I'll call them or whatever, and they're like, oh, I just listened to your podcast. And I'm like, why? I do, like, well, why are you doing a podcast? So it's funny. It's like the relationship of like, we are doing a podcast. We love sharing knowledge, information. We love sharing. But on the other end, it's very self-conscious when someone is telling you, I'm listening to you. You're like, oh no. Why?
Right. And it takes you off guard because the deal. Not that I'm sure you agree. Not that I'm in a performative space when I'm here, but I'm more like aligned. This is more my truth. And if someone sees me at the grocery store, sometimes like, whoa, like I'm not mentally prepared to be like, oh, wow. So that has been a very interesting journey. And I absolutely never, it's funny. I was recently featured in Cosmo magazine, and my family were like, we're so proud of you, but we wish it was for something else. They're like, that's such an accomplishment, but couldn't it have been over a different topic? I'm like, I know, I'm sorry. So never would have, like, literally never would have dreamed this up. I think I would have been furious because I was highly self-conscious. So I think I would have been like, no, please don't draw attention to me in that way. That makes me feel really uncomfortable because it draws a lot of attention to you. And so I'd been like, no, like, please, that's too much. No, never. I never wanted to do this. And it's funny. I always say like, like the universe truly lovingly pushed me into this. Because I still do. I was doing, and my love and my passion was always acting. And so I was doing acting. And again, sometimes I will do voiceover jobs as the Amy Schumer thing, and auditions and all that. And I had a year that was like a come to Jesus year where there was lots of deaths around my friends. I was dealing with an eating disorder, which is part of why I do the body love work. And a family member was diagnosed with cancer. And it was like, okay, you either sink or swim here. And actually, I forgot, dealing with a horrible breakup. So it's like, you either sink here or you swim. You shrivel up or you thrive. And I remember, at least with the cancer, helping a family member with the cancer, I got really into holistic medicine. So I was like, oh, let's eat this type of stuff and this. And then it slowly spiraled out of control where it was like, and again, I never wanted to claim it. I was like, for fun, let me take this certification. For fun, let me do this. And for fun, everyone was like, this is, and so I would say for fun, and would have people come over and do sessions and all this stuff. And everyone's like, you're starting a coaching business. I'm like, no, I'm not. And so it organic, truly, I could have never made this up, organically snowballed in a way. And I'm still like, wow, that's one of the biggest, not mysteries of my life, but I'm like, I would have never, ever dreamt this specific thing up.
Well, I get that 100%. I always hated my voice. So if you told me I would do a podcast, I would have been like, yeah, whatever.
Right.
But now I got over it. I'm like, well, whatever. It's my voice. What do you want me to do about that? But let's get back to a bit more serious. So you consult with women alone and you consult as well with couples.
Yes. So it's open to everyone. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question here. How, like, let's say I'm in my marriage right now and I feel we're having issues. And, you know, I'm not comfortable really telling my husband, well, I think you're the issue. Because that's what I'm thinking. How do I bring it to be able to bring him to a coach? I fake your name, or I tell him it's a marriage counseling, or what? Like, how do you get there? Honestly, I'm asking jokingly and seriously at the same time, because I wouldn't know how to tell my husband, I think we need to go see a sexual empowerment coach.
Yeah, it's funny because and this is, you know, the sexual empowerment thing is almost for marketing reasons too, meaning like, you know, the deal. I am tempted to be like, I also do marriage and I also do this and I also do that. But then people they black out in a way because they're like, I can't hear. It's too many things. It's too many things. So what I would suggest to people is always, you know, using it about, instead of like, you're wrong, you're bad, you're this, more claiming it like me. So the person could say like, hey, I'm really struggling with my empowerment. I feel really disempowered right now. And I think it's bleeding out into the relationship. I found someone, her title's kind of, it's not, I think it's a little deceiving. How about we listen to her podcast or how about, so then it doesn't feel as, whoa, is this person like a dominatrix, which is fine. But like, is this person like, it kind of softens what the work is. Because I think people hear it and then they read my website or they listen to podcasts like, oh, okay, that's a little bit different than I thought. But I would suggest, and this is for any relationship problem, not for anything, but you know what I mean? Like to really make it about you versus they are bad, you're wrong, you, because you know the deal. People then are like, bye, like I can't hear this then. So I have been feeling this way. I would love for us to, you know, explore this and So I think that's one way to do it. And then also holding your person through, oh, this isn't as wild as we think it is. You know, like I look at our Instagram. Oh, it's not that crazy. I listen to the podcast. Oh, I actually could, you know, be really empowered. So I love that question because I think it's like, I want to work with this person. And also, even if people want to work individually, sometimes if they're, you know, in a marriage and they have to consult their partner financially, or like even, you know, like, oh, can I take this hour a week and you watch the kids? You have to, sometimes people want to consult their partners. So I hear that a lot too. Like, how do I bring this up to my partner? You know, like, can I invest in this financially, but not even financially? Can you watch the kids for an hour? Or is it okay if I take an hour a week? And so I think it's important to focus on why you want it and the reasons why it would empower you, the reasons why you think you would feel better. Because ultimately, if you have a partner that loves you and supports you, they want you to thrive. You know, they want you to thrive. So I think that instead of focus, you can say like, this is what I'm struggling with, but I really want to feel this. I've lost this feeling. I want to get back to that. And I think it's harder to argue that. You know what I mean? I think that's a good way to go about it.
Well, I think in a nutshell, it's about empowerment. You know,
exactly.
I like actually what you said. There's a big part that is marketing. So probably your title goes like, woo, you hear that and you're like, okay, so yes, keep walking, don't talk to me, or tell me everything.
Yes.
It is different, but it's really about empowerment. And that's one thing that I've learned, you know, getting older, is that you have to embrace everything that you are and who you are, and your femininity is so important. And actually, like, I did another podcast on that, on femininity, and it's crucial. It's crucial, and it's actually beautiful, and it's something we should embrace and not be ashamed of. And you know, there's absolutely no taboo around that, and we are powerful as women. So let's just, you know, I'm sorry for all the men out there, but I'm talking to the women. Let's just feel empowered. I want to talk about another subject with you because,
Yes.
I think a lot of people, I've been open about that for a while now. I separated with my husband 4 years ago. He moved out for 2 years, and now with COVID, he moved back in for 2 years now, but we're still separated. But in that 2 years, so I was 45, and I tried the dating thing. And oh my goodness, that doesn't work. Let's talk about how do you date after a certain age? And especially, and I'm talking about that because I feel it goes with the empowerment part. Because that's when I really realized, when you've been married for a while, you don't know how to date anymore. You don't know what to say anymore. You feel you don't know what your worth is anymore. And you feel like, especially after a certain age, I know that when I was looking and I was 45, I was looking for men of my age or 50, and they're looking for 30 years old. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Right.
So how do you deal with all of that? Like going back or going period into the dating world, feeling how to feel empowered in that. And
yeah, it's funny. I'll say there's a lot of different ways, but I think I'll say this: mindset, confidence, and love vision. And love vision, the idea of the love vision I got from an amazing coach, Nicole Moore, and I took my spin on it, but I want to give her credit for it. So I'll go backwards. So the love vision, for me at least, I took again from Nicole Moore. I worked with her and then I shook it into my own, is being so set on what you want. Because you know the deal. We're going to have horrendous. I think most people can write books about their dating life. Like, what was that? Like most people have wilds, which is crazy that that's the statistic that like most people are like, I could write a book. Like you hear that narrative all the time. I mean, I would say too, like I could write a book. It was so crazy. It's so crazy. And so I try to really impose with my clients having a really strong love vision. And what that means is having a really strong vision for what they want to create. So because you know the deal, if you get knocked down 3 times, it's then if you don't have anything that you're working towards, it's like, I don't want to get back up again. I'm down. Well, you know what? I'm cool with being the cool aunt, like I'm cool with just being cool and living my life. And if that's what you're cool with, I'm so happy for you. But if you actually have a genuine desire, I really help clients flush out what is that love vision. So yes, they may fall. Yes, they may stumble. We take a breather, we dust ourselves off, we take good care of ourselves, and then we come back to the love vision. We come back. It's like, it's funny. We do this with money all the time. Where it's like, but we do. It's so funny. We don't do this with love, but we do it with money. It's like, okay, I'm going to make something up. I want to save $20,000 this year. Oh man, I didn't put $5,000 aside this month. I only put $3,000. Okay, no problem. It's still a celebration. I'm going to get back up. Maybe I'm going to cut some corners. Maybe I'm going to delete my Netflix. I don't know. But like we are not as emotionally attached. We might be like, oh shucks. But we get back up. Like we easily, more cleanly get back up. And with this, it's the same intention that I want you to know exactly what you want. So you may fall, you may have to dust yourself off, but then you get back up. So that's one that's like important. Because I know for at least me, when I was like, oh, I don't really know what I want. You don't want to get back up. You don't want to try it because you're like, forget it. I'm throwing in the towel. And that's when we spiral with maybe this isn't for me. Maybe this isn't the cards for me. Like all of those stories then come out to play, which then transitions me into mindset. Like mindset is a huge component of this work. Believing in yourself, believing it could happen. Because there's so many stories of like, there's no good men or there's no good women or there's no good people. And you know the deal, especially when we bond, we regurgitate those stories. Like, oh my gosh, yes, they are all cheaters or they're all horrible. Like we bond in storytelling, which some of the stories are true, but we then get off, we bond in those stories. So I, with my clients, try to find not just affirmations, because that's great, but actually find the root of their fears around love and around dating and flip them and really have them conscious around what they're thinking and also what they're speaking with people. Because we usually bond in misery. We usually bond and commiserate where there's a space for that to, can you hear me? Can I vent to you? But when it becomes chronic, that's where it becomes a little problematic. And the last is confidence. Because you know the deal. If you get pushed down 3 times, our brain is really cute and is like, maybe there is something wrong with me. Mm-hmm. And so I want us to have such an unwavering confidence, like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm great. It just wasn't a match. And I'm going to come back to my love vision. So that's where the confidence piece is really important, that you don't take a no or take a crazy situation and make it personal. You're like, that was wacky, but I still feel good about myself. I'm not making myself wrong and I'm not making myself bad. So again, there's probably more pillars we could talk about, but at least the 3 that are present right now is love vision, mindset, and confidence.
And I love that. You're talking about love vision, and it's funny because I did try the online dating. Yeah. That's actually when I started thinking about starting a blog, because I was just like, this is just a ridiculous experience. And I did it for about 2 months, met one person who made sense. But the rest, I was just like, this is crazy because it's not natural dating. Like for me, you meet someone, you get to know each other, there's chemistry, and then feelings developed, and eventually you decide to get together and you work things out. But online dating is like, do you have a dog? Yes, I do. Don't like dogs. Thank you. Bye. Do you have tattoos? Yes. Don't like tattoos. Thank you. Bye. Like it's not a love vision. It's a form that people are filling, and they're ticking boxes. And this is so misleading because in reality, if we would meet and you don't like dogs, we'll find a solution. Right. There's, you know what I mean? It's different. And plus, I had those comments of like, do you have a picture that is a bit more clear of yourself? And I was like, dude, seriously, you're 50. I'm going to stop my saying here. But I was just like, did you see yourself? And you're asking for a more clear picture. So it's very, very fake. But, the love vision part that I was saying is that I feel that a lot of people, when they do that kind of dating, they think they have a love vision, and it's not that. It's a form that they have to fill. My part is that I had no love vision. So when someone was asking me, what are you looking for? I could not describe. I could not, because in my mind, it's always like you meet someone and it clicks or it doesn't. Right. But that also what played against me is that I had no love vision. I had no, I want this, and this. And in my case, it's because I wasn't ready, and it took me a while to understand it, but I wasn't ready. But the love vision part is so crucial. Because you need to know what you want. You need to know what you will stand for and what you will not accept. And I think that it's when you really do this work that you stop being in the same vicious cycle of relationships. I don't know about you, but there's a lot of people, we meet one type of person and we're like, oh my gosh, I was the worst. And boom, we jump into the exact same thing. And we're like, oh, that was awful. And boom, we jump into the... So, like, if you don't take the time, and I like also what you said, like for me, business and money, I'm so driven and I have goals, and I can tell you exactly, like if you ask me questions, it's like, I want this, because it's just a normal thing as a business person. Like I wouldn't get up in the morning having no agenda and no goals because I wouldn't know where I'm going. Yes. But we don't apply that to our love life. I never did. And that's something that I'm learning at 47 is that, no, you need a roadmap.
Exactly.
And the thing is, like with the roadmap, we seem to become more difficult because people will be like, wow, she's so difficult. No. It's like, and that's where I love your confidence piece. It's like, no, I now know what I want. And I'm not going to settle for something else. Yes. And this is empowerment as well. So, for everyone out there, if you're not yet with the person of your dreams, keep waiting.
Yes.
My unofficial coaching advice for you. But what's your advice for someone who's a bit, maybe discouraged or is like, I'm never going to find that person? Is it like, well, dig into your vision even more?
Yeah. And belief is a huge thing because especially when we're knocked down, it's easy for our brain to be like, see, this is evidence. It's evidence. It's our brain loves to collect evidence. So I have my clients collect evidence that it's coming to you, that it's close. So instead of a girlfriend getting engaged, you being triggered by that, I'm like, let's look at that as driftwood of like, it didn't happen to me yet, but like, oh my God, it's in my realm. It's coming closer. Like, I want us to, instead of being like, oh my God, another person married, I'm like, yes, another person married. That means you have to be next. Like I try to flip that narrative. So instead of it feeling so disempowering of like, I'm always the bride, the story of I'm always the bridesmaid. It's never for me. Like, I want us to flip the narrative of like, I'm always the bridesmaid. Literally, that means I must be next, or like literally the person must be on their way. Like, and it feels, our brain gets really like, I don't want to believe in that, because that's not true. So we really have to dig our heels into the mindset work, dig our heels into believing that it could happen. And I always say, if you desire it, it can happen. So it's a big, 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 big lesson on belief.
Yeah.
And like, I'm going to believe in this. I'm going to have faith. Like, it's a big faith-based lesson.
And it's super interesting because you and I are two different generation, and I'm just realizing that, well, I knew it, but as I'm listening to you speaking, it's like me, I don't want to say at the end, but I had my marriages. You are at the beginning going towards that. So it's clearly two different visions, but it's interesting how we still think the same way, and it's still
Exactly.
the same blockers, and it's still the same, and especially like I'm looking at my kids who are 21 and 23. I was shocked when my daughter told me she met someone online. I was just like, why are you doing that? You're young and pretty and blah, 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 blah. So it is a new world. But I was listening to her saying these things like boys, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, wow, there's so many relationships that don't work, that a lot of people will take that as a piece of evidence.
Yes.
Going towards something, and especially now in the movies and the shows and everything, there's always someone cheating on someone. It's like the new generation their mindset is very different. Don't believe in the Disney princess anymore. The prince doesn't exist. Like, I was raised like the prince does exist. Now it's like, come on, be real. The prince doesn't exist. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I'm so glad you highlighted that. Like, all of the stuff still comes up. You know what I mean? Like, I hear and I see, every human comes into the Zoom room with me, and different phases in their life, from different backgrounds, and the same stories, the same fears, the same stories are up. Again, different flavors, like you said, for different generation, there might be a little bit difference here and there, but I think it's really being willing to confront some of those beliefs, because they're scary. Like, they're scary. First of all, we bond over those stories, mm-hmm. and we've heard it through our lineage. You know what I mean? Like, go back through the lineage and you hear, oh my gosh, this type of people are so bad. We'll say, oh, men cheat. Like, this is a story that has been passed down. And it feels really unsafe sometimes to break some of those stories. And so that's why mindset it's not the stereotypical mindset of like, I love, like, I am a millionaire. Like, sure, you can do that. But like, this is the mindset of really confronting and looking at those beliefs that are truly not serving you. And I love what you said too, because I wanted to highlight this. You totally hit the nail on the head with the love vision. It's formulating what you want. And I always have my clients do this, is I have them make 2 lists for me. And the first list is their non-negotiables, meaning traits of the person. So if they're like, oh, I want blonde hair, I'm like, no, traits of the person. Are they loyal? Are they funny? What are the non-negotiable traits? Great. After that, I have them write a cherry on top list. And that might be, they have a boat, they have blonde hair, but so often we merge the two, and that kind of creates chaos too. Like, they have blonde hair, but they're not loyal. And so I want us to separate, like, when we are dating, make sure that they hit the non-negotiables. And if they somehow hit cherries on top, God bless, we will take it. That's amazing. But I really want us to keep coming back to what is a non-negotiable, because also that makes things a little bit cleaner too for what you're attracting, but also it makes things less hard, because this, it's like, oh, I want something so specific. It just takes some of the pressure and some of the charge off of the situation.
Yeah, I love that. So your non-negotiables first.
Yes.
The appearance should not be in that, technically. And then the cherries on top is that he's good looking.
Right, exactly. He has a boat, blah, blah, blah. He wants to take me to Paris, all that stuff.
Well, see, it's funny. I might be the only one, the exception, but when they're like, I have a boat, I'm like, I don't like boats.
Yeah, you're like, that's okay. I don't want that.
I'm like, boat is pollution and blah, blah. And you're like, okay, you're clearly a psycho. I'm going to stay away from you. So, yeah. And then I wonder why I'm still single. But I think that I just need a clear love vision and a non-negotiable. And it's also, I think, as you grow older, there's a part of, yourself who's comfortable with yourself.
Yes.
So
yes.
You're not looking as much. But for you, Erica, I'm wishing you like the most amazing guy entering your life. And I didn't even ask you if you're single right now. But
thank you.
If he's not there, I wish it upon you. And if he's there, well, you better be good.
Thank you.
I think we talk about marriage, we talk about love, we talk about sexuality and all of that. And you're so right. We tend to go to the negative because that's where we bond. Because, if we would be all sitting here around the table and I would be like, my husband is amazing, your husband, and she would be like, oh, mine is too. And it would be a pretty boring conversation. We would be like, okay, done. Right. So we do bond over negative, but, positive and love always win in the end. And I'm a hopeless romantic. I still believe in it. Yes, I do still believe in my Disney prince. He's going to arrive eventually with the horse.
Yes.
With the boat.
Not with the boat, but with the horse.
Yes. But in closing, what do you want to leave our, all of the women that are listening to us now, what do you want to leave them with to get out there and be happier and more empowered?
I love this. We didn't really touch on this, so I'm like, we'll have to have a follow-up conversation. But I want to remind, all the listeners that they're worthy of not just having a fine life. That's not good. Like, that's not good enough because you came here. I know if you're listening to this podcast, I know you don't want just a fine life or it's good. Like, I know you are craving greatness. I know you're craving thriving and happiness and juice and all of the amazing things. And I want to remind the listeners that is possible for you. It sounds corny, but it is possible for you. You are worthy of those things. I know you might be like, I want them, but am I worthy? Am I good enough? Yes, I can tell you right now, you're good enough. You're worthy of having all of those things. And it's available. The good news is it's not far away from you. It is available. And amazing resources like us are here to support you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Erica. It was such a pleasure having you. And, I feel like we could have done 4 podcasts because we have so many different subjects. And I'm probably going to bring you back on because you're fun as well.
Thank you.
To all of the listeners, thank you so much for being here again this week. I appreciate you. If you have any comments or suggestions, please write to me at info@simplycaroline.com. And I will put all of Erica's information and her free resources and all of it for you to be able to reach her and also start working on yourself. So to everyone, have a beautiful week and I'll see you next week.